Evelyn Quincy stumbled into Red Hollow one day late, her doctor's bag clutched to her ribs while the church bell tolled for the wedding she had already missed. Dust streaked her skirt, fever burned behind her eyes, and every face on the boardwalk turned as if her exhaustion were a public disgrace. The widow who arranged the match whispered that no decent man waited on a woman who arrived after vows were due. Then Theodore Holbrook, the canyon cowboy with grief carved around his mouth, stepped from the shade and saw what everyone ignored. Trembling hands, hollow cheeks, and a woman still trying to stand. Before we ride into this story, let me know what country you are watching from. Comment your country below, and subscribe if you love emotional cowboy stories about shame, rescue, forgiveness, and second chances. The bell above Red Hollow's little white church had not rung for joy. It had rung because Mrs. Beatrice Stowe insisted it should, even after the bride failed to appear the day before, even after the flowers wilted in their jars, even after every child in town had heard that Dr. Evelyn Quincy had left a canyon cowboy standing alone before the preacher. By the time Evelyn came in on the noon stage, there was no wedding left to save. There was only dust, staring eyes, and a silence sharp enough to cut through her worn gloves. She stepped down from the coach with one hand on the rail and the other wrapped around her black doctor's bag. The driver did not offer her much help. He was bone-tired himself, and the horses had come in flecked with foam from the hard road through the gorge. Evelyn's knees trembled when her boots touched the dirt. She had been awake through 2 nights of fever, 1 hard birth, and a dead axle on a lonely stretch of road where coyotes cried from the dark like lost souls. But Red Hollow did not see that. They saw a woman with wind-torn hair, a torn hem, and a face too pale for a bride. They saw a late arrival. They saw shame. She came, someone whispered from the mercantile porch. A day late, another voice answered. Evelyn lifted her chin because it was the only dignity she had left. Her blue traveling dress had once looked respectable. Now it was rubbed gray at the cuffs, dusted brown from the stage, and marked near the sleeve where a sick child had clutched her through the night. She looked down once and saw the stain. She remembered the little boy at Mercy Bend, his pulse fluttering beneath her fingers, his mother begging, "Please, doctor, please don't leave him." So Evelyn had not left him, and now the whole town believed she had left Theodore Holbrook. The church doors stood open across the road. A cluster of ladies hovered near the steps, their hats bright as judgment. Near them stood Mrs. Beatrice Stowe, a tall widow in black silk with a face that never seemed to soften. She was the woman who had answered Evelyn's letter, arranged the match, and written that Theodore Holbrook needed a steady wife, a doctor's hands, and a woman brave enough for canyon country. Now Beatrice looked Evelyn over as though she were spoiled meat. "Well," she said, loud enough for half the street to hear, "Dr. Quincy has finally remembered her promise." Evelyn swallowed. Her throat felt scraped raw from thirst. "I was delayed," she said. "There was sickness at Mercy Bend." Beatrice gave a small, bitter laugh. There is always a story when a woman misses her own wedding. A few men near the livery chuckle, not loudly, not kindly, just enough. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her bag. "Where is Mr. Holbrook?" That question quieted the street. No one answered at once. Then a boy of about 9, barefoot and sharp-eyed, pointed toward the shaded side of the blacksmith shop. Evelyn turned. Theodore Holbrook stood there with his hat low and his shoulders squared as if he had been carved from the canyon wall itself. He was tall, broad through the chest, and sun-browned from work, with dark hair showing beneath the brim of his hat. His jaw carried a rough edge of stubble, and his eyes were the color of stormwater under stone. He did not come running. He did not smile. He simply looked at Evelyn, as if every step she had taken toward Red Hollow had brought him both an answer and an old wound. The sight of him struck her harder than she expected. This was the man whose careful letters had crossed hundreds of miles to reach her. He had written plainly, never with flowery affection. He had told her about Holbrook Canyon, about a ranch too far from proper help, about a little girl who needed schooling, about neighbors who went without care because the nearest doctor charged too much and traveled too little. He had written, "I cannot promise ease. I can promise honest work, a roof that does not leak, and respect." Evelyn had believed that might be enough. Now Theodore crossed the street. The town watched every step. He stopped before her, close enough for Evelyn to see the dust along his coat and the faint scar at his temple. He removed his hat, but not warmly. It was courtesy more than welcome. "Dr. Quincy," he said. His voice was low, controlled, and tired in a way that matched her own. "Mr. Holbrook," she answered. There should have been something more, an apology, an explanation, a hand offered, a question spoken gently. But grief had made Theo cautious, and humiliation had made Evelyn proud. Beatrice stepped closer. The preacher waited until sunset. Theodore waited longer than any man should. The supper went cold. People rode from 12 miles out. "A promise means something here, Dr. Quincy." Evelyn felt heat rise in her face. "A life meant something where I was." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "Convenient." Theodore's gaze flicked down to Evelyn's hands. Only then did he notice they were shaking. Not with guilt, not with nerves, with exhaustion. He saw the cracked skin at her knuckles, the dried blood at one cuff, the dust gathered in the hollow of her throat. He saw that she had not eaten. He saw the way she stood as if her bones were held together only by will. But Theodore had learned the hard way not to trust what mercy first showed him. Once before, he had waited for a doctor. Once before, he had believed help was coming. By the time it arrived, the canyon flood had taken his wife's hand from his and carried his little daughter beyond the cottonwoods. A doctor had come late then, too. The old bitterness rose in him before he could stop it. "You should have sent word," he said. Evelyn's face changed. It was not anger first. It was hurt. "I tried," she said. "The telegraph line was down beyond Mercy Bend. I paid a rider with the last coins I had. No rider came. Then he either turned back or kept my money." Someone laughed again, this time from the saloon rail. Evelyn flinched as if struck, though she kept standing. Theodore heard the laugh. He heard Beatrice's satisfied breath. He heard the town waiting for him to reject this woman in public and be done with it. He looked at Evelyn's bag. "What happened at Mercy Bend?" he asked. Her eyes lifted to his. "Measles in 3 children, childbed fever in 1 mother, a broken leg from the stage accident. I could not leave them until another doctor came." "Did one?" "Yes, when?" "This morning before dawn." "And then you wrote?" "I wrote." A long silence followed. Beatrice folded her hands. "The issue, Theodore, is not whether she has a tender excuse. The issue is whether a man should bind his name to a woman who makes him a spectacle." Evelyn took one breath too quickly. The world tilted. The boardwalk seemed to rise and fall beneath the sun. She had held herself upright through the last 10 miles by thinking only of arrival. Now arrival had become another trial. She reached for the stage wheel, missed, and would have fallen if Theodore Holbrook had not caught her by the elbow. His grip was firm, not possessive. Evelyn hated that she needed it. "I am not fainting," she whispered. "No," Theodore said. "You are starving." "I have eaten." "When?" She did not answer. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, his cold manner cracked enough to reveal anger, though not at her. He turned toward the mercantile. "Mrs. Bell, do you still have stew on the stove?" A stout woman in a flour-dusted apron blinked. "I do." "Set a bowl in the back room." "Brah, too." Beatrice stiffened. "Theodore, surely you are not?" "I am not marrying anybody in the street," Theodore said. "I am feeding a doctor." The words fell plain and hard, not romantic, not forgiving, but merciful. Evelyn looked at him then, truly looked, and saw that he was not a gentleman by habit. Something in him had gone locked and wintered, yet he stood between her and the town all the same. He bent slightly. Not enough to make a show of helping. Only enough for her alone. "Can you walk, Dr. Quincy?" "Yes." "Then walk beside me." "Not behind." That was how Evelyn Quincy crossed Red Hollow's main street on the day after her failed wedding, not as a bride on a man's arm, not as a woman rescued from all shame, but as an exhausted doctor walking beside a canyon cowboy who had not yet decided whether he could trust her, though he had already decided no one else would be allowed to watch her fall. Mrs. Bell's back room smelled of beef stew, yeast bread, coffee, and drying herbs. It was dim after the white glare of the street, and Evelyn nearly wept from the relief of shade. She did not weep. She was too practiced for that. Doctors learn to put their tears in small, hidden places, behind closed doors, beneath handkerchiefs, into basins after washing blood from their hands. Theodore pulled out a chair without touching her again. Evelyn sat because refusing would have been foolish, and she tried not to notice how quickly her body surrendered to the rest. Mrs. Bell set down a bowl, a heel of bread, and a cup of coffee with more kindness than curiosity. "You eat slow now," the woman said. "A stomach as empty as yours can turn against you." Evelyn managed a small smile. "Thank you." When Mrs. Bell left, Theodore remained standing near the door, as if guarding it from gossip. "You need not watch me," Evelyn said. "I am watching the door. From me, from them." She looked down at the stew. The steam blurred her eyes. She took one spoonful and nearly trembled from the warmth of it. Theodore saw but said nothing. That silence helped more than sympathy would have. After several bites, Evelyn said, "I did not mean to humiliate you. I know what you meant. And what happened are not always kin. That sounds like blame. It is experience." She set the spoon down. "Then, perhaps we should speak plainly. Do you still intend to marry me?" His eyes moved to the small window, where the street shimmered in heat. "No." The word landed softly but heavily. Evelyn nodded once. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to meet it with composure. "I understand." "No," Theodore said again, and this time his gaze returned to hers. "You do not. I will not marry a woman who has not slept, eaten, or been given a fair hearing. A wedding today would be another injury." Evelyn did not know what to do with that answer. "Then what am I to do? You can rest, and after that, you can decide whether Holbrook Canyon is still where you mean to go." She studied him. "You would let me come after this? My nice Lottie has a cough that turns bad at night. 2 ranch hands have wives expecting before harvest. There are children in the canyon who have never seen a doctor unless one was passing through on the army road. You came to work, didn't you?" "Yes." "Then work remains, and the marriage." His mouth tightened. That was practical. Practical for whom? For the court? For the land office? For the school board? For every man who thinks a bachelor with a child under his roof must either marry quick or surrender her to relatives with cleaner pallors. Evelyn leaned back. "You have a child. My sister's girl, Lottie. She is 6. You did not say she was your sister's child in the letters." "I said she was under my care." "Why hide it?" Theodore's hand flexed once at his side. "Because people hear orphan and start making decisions. Beatrice Stowe has already made too many." Evelyn remembered the widow's sharp voice. "She arranged our letters." "She arranged more than that." A shadow passed through his face, but he did not explain. Evelyn took another bite of stew because her hands were still shaking and pride would not heal that. When she finished half the bowl, she found the strength to ask what had been weighing on her since he said no. "Did you wait long yesterday?" Theodore looked at the floor. "Until the lamps burned out." "I am sorry." He accepted the apology with a nod, but not forgiveness. "Not yet." A knock came at the back door. Mrs. Bell opened it to reveal a young ranch hand in a sweat-dark shirt, breathing hard. "Mr. Holbrook," the boy said. "It's Lottie. Cough's worse. Miss Nora says she's burning." Theodore went still. All the guarded distance dropped from him in a single instant. Evelyn saw fear beneath it. Raw, immediate fear. She pushed back from the table. Theodore turned. You cannot ride. I can if a child needs me. You nearly fell in the street. And now I have eaten. That is not enough. No, Evelyn said, reaching for her bag, but it will have to serve. Theodore's eyes met hers. In them, she saw the war between distrust and need. Need won, but it cost him. My wagon is out back, he said. He did not offer his hand. She did not ask for it. But when she stood, he moved close enough that, if she faltered, no one would see her fall. The road to Holbrook Canyon cut through redstone and sage, past dry washes, where cottonwoods gathered in silver-green clusters. The afternoon sun leaned hard on the earth, but by the time the wagon entered the canyon mouth, shadow cooled the trail. Evelyn sat beside Theodore on the wagon bench, one hand braced against the seat, the other resting on her doctor's bag. He drove with quiet skill, reins loose but controlled, his gaze moving constantly across the trail. The canyon suited him, she thought. It was stern from a distance, forbidding even. But the deeper they went, the more life appeared. Juniper clung to stone. Wildflowers grew in cracks. Water whispered somewhere below the trail, hidden but present. Holbrook Ranch sat in a wide basin at the canyon's heart. It was not grand, but it was well kept. A long, low house of timber and stone faced the east. Corrals stood to one side, a barn beyond, and a garden struggled bravely behind a fence built against rabbits and wind. Smoke rose from the kitchen chimney. A woman in her 30s rushed from the house as the wagon stopped. Mr. Theodore. She's asking for you? Theodore jumped down. How high? High enough to scare me. Evelyn followed with her bag. Her legs protested, but the familiar call of illness steadied her. In sick rooms she understood who she was. Not late bride, not spectacle, not burden. Doctor. The child lay in a small bed near the window, cheeks flushed, curls damp at her temples. Lottie Holbrook was a narrow little thing with solemn eyes, and a rag doll tucked beneath one arm. When Theodore entered, she reached for him. He crossed to her at once and knelt. I'm here, Bird. My chest hurts. I brought Dr. Quincy. Lottie's fever-bright gaze shifted to Evelyn. Are you the lady who missed the wedding? Theodore closed his eyes briefly. Evelyn set down her bag and smiled with all the gentleness she had left. I am the lady who came one day late and intends to be useful anyway. Lottie considered that. Can you fix coughs? I can try. The examination was slow and careful. Evelyn listened to the child's chest, checked her throat, asked about chills, appetite, sleep, and the dampness of the room at night. It was not the deadly fever Theodore feared. Not yet. A hard bronchial cold, worsened by canyon night air and smoke from a poorly drawing stove. She needs steam. Mustard cloth only if the cough tightens and the bed moved away from the window draft, Evelyn said. No heavy milk tonight. Broth. Honey, if you have it. I will sit with her until the fever breaks. Theodore stared at her. You need sleep. So does she. Lottie's small fingers touched Evelyn's sleeve. You smell like dust. I expect I do. Pa Theo smells like horses. I expect he does. Theodore's expression changed at the name, pain passing briefly through his eyes. Papa, Theo, not father, but near enough to a. That night, Evelyn stayed beside Lottie's bed while the house settled around them. Theodore carried in a kettle for steam. Nora, the housekeeper, brought broth and a clean cloth. Later, when Lottie slept easier, Theodore appeared in the doorway with a plate. Mrs. Bell sent bread. Nora added eggs. Evelyn looked up. I can eat later. No, but doctors lie about later. The bluntness should have offended her. Instead, it nearly made her smile. He set the plate on the small table and stepped away. He did not hover. He did not watch her hands this time. She ate in the quiet while Lottie breathed softly. After a while, Theodore said, There was a doctor when my wife drowned. Evelyn still. He stood half in shadow, his face turned toward the window. Abigail lived long enough to ask if Sarah was safe. Sarah was not. The doctor got there after dark. Road was washed out. It was not his fault. But you hated him anyway. His jaw worked. Yes. And now you hate lateness. I hate waiting with nothing in my hands. There it was. Not cruelty. Fear hardened until it looked like judgment. Evelyn set the plate aside. Mercy bend. The mother would have died if I left. Her baby, too. I knew what it would cost me here. Why did you not write that in your letter? Because I was on a floor holding a woman down while fever tried to take her. There was no ink in my hand, Mr. Holbrook. He took the rebuke quietly. After a long moment, he said, Theodore. She looked at him. If you were going to doctor my household through the night, you might as well call me Theodore. Then you might call me Evelyn. His name in her mouth softened something in the room. Not much, not enough to call tenderness, but enough that when he brought another blanket near dawn and placed it over her shoulders without waking Lottie, Evelyn did not refuse. The days that followed did not turn shame into romance all at once. They turned it first into work. Evelyn moved through Holbrook Ranch with her sleeves rolled, her hair pinned badly, and her doctor's bag never far from reach. Lottie's fever broke. Nora's sister came from a neighboring homestead with a burned hand. A ranch hand named Silas limped in with a hoof bruise he had ignored till his boot would not fit. A Mexican shepherd from the lower canyon brought his pregnant wife, Marisol, because she had pains too early and feared losing the child. Evelyn treated them all. She asked no one whether they had money before she opened her bag. Theodore noticed. He noticed too much. He noticed that she hummed under her breath when measuring laudanum, not from cheer but concentration. He noticed she spoke more softly to frightened men than to proud ones. He noticed she saved the last biscuit at breakfast for Lottie and pretended she was not hungry. He noticed she never sat with her back to a door. The last troubled him. One evening, after a storm rolled over the canyon and left everything smelling of wet sage, he found Evelyn in the barn, tending to a young mare that had cut her flank on loose wire. Rain drummed on the roof. Lantern light gilded the damp strands of hair at Evelyn's temples. You have done enough today, Theodore said. That mare disagrees. She is livestock. She is frightened. Pain is pain. He leaned against a stall post, arms folded. You say that like a sermon, Nora, like a lesson learned badly. The mare shifted. Evelyn placed a calming hand against its neck. Theodore watched how the animal settled beneath her touch. Who taught you? He asked. My father first. He was a doctor in Ohio, then a hospital in St. Louis that did not like admitting women but liked unpaid hands well enough. And after that, Evelyn's stitching slowed. Theodore had come to understand her pauses. Some were fatigue, some were memory. This one was caution. After that, she said, I worked with a physician named Julian Pike. Theodore's eyes sharpened. Worked with? Yes, that is not all. No. He waited. She tied the stitch. He asked me to marry him. I said yes before I knew what kind of man he was. The rain grew heavier. He drank, she continued. Then he stole morphine from patients. When I discovered it, he said no one would believe a woman doctor over him. I reported him anyway. What happened? He was dismissed quietly. Respectable men often are. Then he made sure every physician I sought heard that I was unstable, immoral, and careless with medicine. Her mouth curved without humor. When Mrs. Stowe's letter came, it sounded like mercy. Theodore felt a slow anger build in him. You came here because other doors closed. I came here because people in a canyon needed a doctor. She looked up then. Do not make my need smaller than my purpose. The words struck him. He had done that. My bay not allowed. But in his own mind, he had seen her first as late, then exhausted, then useful, not whole. The mare breathed easier beneath Evelyn's palm. Theodore removed his hat. I judged you. Yes, I am sorry. She searched his face, perhaps expecting pride to take the apology back. It did not. I accept, she said. That should have ended the conversation, but the storm held them there, two people surrounded by the quiet sounds of animals and rain. Theodore spoke again. Beatrice Stowe did not arrange our match out of kindness. Her brother, Caleb, wants the canyon water. If the court says I'm unfit to raise Lottie, Beatrice will take her into town. If that happens, Caleb will offer to buy the ranch cheap to us. Without Lottie here, with no school, no doctor, no proper household, the judge might call this place unsuitable. The marriage offer matters because of Lottie, and because of the families here. A married man with a doctor wife can petition for a school and clinic. A bachelor cowboy with a dead wife and a temper is easier to dismiss. Evelyn looked at him closely. Do you have a temper? I keep it locked. That was not the question. His mouth tightened. Yes. Does it frighten Lottie? Shame moved through his eyes. Once, after Abigail and Sarah died, I threw a chair against the wall. Lottie saw. She hid beneath the kitchen table. I have not raised my voice in the house since. So, now you freeze instead. He looked away. Evelyn finished tying the bandage on the mare. Cold can frighten a child too. No one has said that to him. Not Nora. Not Beatrice. Not the preacher. They had praised him for being steady, strong, controlled. Evelyn saw the cost of it. The next morning, Theodore tried to be less cold and failed awkwardly. He sat at breakfast too stiffly, asked Lottie about her doll in a voice that sounded like he was questioning a witness, and spilled coffee when Evelyn hid a smile behind her cup. You find me amusing, he said. No, you do. I find you try. Lottie looked between them. Trying funny? Sometimes, Evelyn said. Theodore gave her a look, but there was no anger in it. That afternoon, he saddled a gentle bay and took Evelyn to the upper ridge, where the canyon opened toward blue distance. She had not asked for the rye. He said only that doctors needed air not scented with liniment and boiled cloth. They rode side by side through wet grass and stone. At the ridge, Evelyn saw the whole valley below. The ranch house, the creek, the corrals, the small cluster of cabins where hands and families lived. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children chased each other near the wash line. Far off, cattle moved like dark beads across the slope. It is beautiful, she said. It is hard. Most beautiful things are. Theodore looked at her then. The wind pressed her skirt against the saddle and loosened a strand of hair against her cheek. She looked tired still, but not beaten. Something in him, long buried beneath grief and duty, stirred with dangerous warmth. He wanted to touch that loose strand. He did not. Instead, he said, when you first came, I thought my being late told me everything about you. And now I think it told me what you were willing to lose for someone who needed you. Evelyn's eyes softened. Neither of them confessed anything. The canyon was too wide, and their wounds too old for sudden declarations. But when they turned for home, Theodore slowed his horse so hers would not stumble on the rocky descent. Evelyn noticed and said nothing. That night, she left the last biscuit for him. The pressure began with a letter. It arrived 3 days later in the hand of a town rider, sealed with the mark of Judge Ansel Whitcomb. Theodore read it on the porch, while Evelyn sat nearby, mending the torn lining of her medical bag. His face hardened line by line. What is it? She asked. He folded the letter too carefully. Custody hearing moved forward. 2 weeks from now, for Lottie. Yes. Beatrice claims I have placed the child under the care of an unknown woman of questionable reputation. Evelyn's needle stopped. Theodore's voice went flat. She also claims our broken wedding proves instability in the household. Broken, Evelyn repeated softly. He looked at her. Her word, but useful. Yes. That evening, another rider came. This one brought worse news. A physician had arrived in Red Hollow. Dr. Julian Pike. Evelyn stood very still when she heard the name. Theodore saw the color leave her face and hated the man before he ever saw him. Pike wasted no time. By morning, his accusations had spread through Red Hollow and up the canyon road. He claimed Evelyn had stolen instruments, misused medicine, abandoned patients, and fled eastward under scandal. He said the delay at Mercy Bend was invented. He said no respectable court should trust a woman whose own profession had cast her out. Some did not believe him. Enough did. Marisol's husband still brought eggs in gratitude. Mrs. Bell sent word that Evelyn had friends at her table, but the school board postponed its petition. The preacher sent a note advising Theodore to proceed with caution. Silas heard two men in the saloon wagering how long before Theodore sent the late doctor back where she came from. Kindness, Evelyn learned again, could feed a person, warm her, shelter her, and still not be enough to protect her name. Theodore drove her into town 2 days later because she insisted on answering Pike directly. "You do not have to stand in front of them," he said as the wagon neared Red Hollow. "Yes, I do. They have already chosen what they want to hear. Then I will speak to the ones who have not." His hands tightened on the reins. "And if he lies, then he lies in daylight." The town hall smelled of dust, sweat, old wood, and kerosene. Beatrice sat in the front row beside Caleb Stowe, a thick-necked man with a silver watch chain and eyes that measured everything by profit. Dr. Julian Pike stood near the clerk's table in a fine brown suit that fit too well for a man who claimed hardship. His beard was trimmed. His smile was sorrowful, in the practiced way of a liar. When Evelyn entered, the room murmured. Pike removed his hat. "Evelyn, I had hoped never to see you brought so low." Theodore stepped forward. Evelyn touched his sleeve once, stopping him. "I am not low, Dr. Pike. I am tired of being spoken about by cowards." A ripple passed through the room. Pike's smile thinned, still sharp. "That was always your trouble." Evelyn faced the town. She told them of Mercy Bend, of the sick children, of the mother whose fever broke near dawn. She told them she had stayed because leaving would have killed people. She told them that Pike had lost his position for theft of medicine. Pike sighed as though grieving. "You see, accusation without proof." Her father's death unsettled her mind. Her ambition did the rest. Evelyn's hands curled. Theodore waited for her to look at him. She did not. Judge Whitcomb, who had come to observe, peered over his spectacles. "Mr. Holbrook, you brought Dr. Quincy into your household. Do you vouch for her character?" There it was. A simple question. A public defense. Theodore felt every eye turn toward him. He thought of Lottie. The custody hearing. The ranch. The school petition. If he bound his name to Evelyn's before proof was found, Pike's scandal might become his. Beatrice would use it. Caleb would use it. The judge would remember. Fear moved faster than courage. "She has served my household well as a doctor," Theodore said. The room waited. Evelyn waited too. Theodore heard his own words fall short. "Yes, a doctor," Beatrice asked sweetly, "but not as your intended wife." Theodore's jaw clenched. Evelyn looked at him then, not pleading, not accusing, only seeing. And because she saw him clearly, his failure burned worse. "She is under my protection while at Holbrook Ranch," he said. It sounded honorable. It was not enough. Pike smiled. The meeting dissolved into murmurs and motions. No verdict reached but damage done. Evelyn walked out before Theodore could reach her. He found her behind the hall, one hand against the wall. Breathing through pain, she refused to show. "Evelyn, do not." "I was trying to keep the hearing from turning against Lottie. I know that hurt more than anger." She looked at him with exhausted gentleness. "You told the truth you could afford." He flinched. "Evelyn, I have lived too long on truths men could afford." She walked to the wagon and climbed up without help. The ride back to the canyon was silent. That night, Theodore stood outside Lottie's room and heard Evelyn reading to her in a soft voice. The child laughed once, then coughed, then settled. Theodore leaned his forehead against the doorframe. He had told himself he was protecting the child, but perhaps he had only protected his fear. At dawn, a storm came down from the high country, with black clouds and hard rain. By noon, the creek was rising. By mid-afternoon, a rider From the lower canyon came shouting that a wagon had overturned near Split Rock, where floodwater cut the road. 2 men were hurt, 1 child trapped. Evelyn reached for her bag before the rider finished speaking. Theodore blocked the doorway. "The wash will be dangerous. Then hitch the team." "No," her eyes flashed. "A child is trapped. I lost a child to floodwater, and you will lose another by standing still." The words struck the deepest wound in him. For 1 terrible second, anger rose. His voice sharpened. "You think I do not know that?" Lottie, standing in the hall with her doll, startled at the sound. Theodore saw her face. Fear, the old kind. His anger died immediately. He stepped back, shaken by himself. Evelyn saw it all. The flare, the regret, the child's fear, the man trapped between past and present. She spoke more softly. "Theodore, come with me. Not because you are not afraid, because you are." That was the first time anyone had made courage sound like permission to tremble. They rode into the storm. The overturned wagon belonged to Caleb Stowe. That was the hard mercy of it. Caleb had been traveling with Pike and a clerk, hauling documents and medical crates from town to her. The road had given way at Split Rock. 1 horse was dead. The wagon lay half in rushing brown water, 1 wheel spinning uselessly. Pike sat on the bank, clutching a bleeding arm, shouting orders at men who ignored him. Caleb was pinned beneath a broken sideboard. From inside the tilted wagon came the thin cry of a child. "Who is that?" Evelyn shouted over the rain. "My nephew," Caleb groaned. "Tommy, for God's sake, get him out." Evelyn looked at Theodore. Every memory of floodwater crossed his face. Then he tied a rope around his waist and handed the other end to Silas. "If I go under, pull." Evelyn grabbed his arm. "The current." No. He went in. The water struck him hard at the thighs, then waist. He moved step by step toward the wagon, while rain hammered his hat brim. Twice he slipped. Twice the men hauled the rope tight. Evelyn stood on the bank with her heart in her throat and her hands ready for a child not yet in them. Theodore reached the wagon, braced 1 shoulder against it, and tore at the canvas flap. A small boy tumbled into his arms. The current surged. For 1 moment Theodore disappeared to the shoulder. Evelyn cried his name. Then he rose, gasping. Child clutched against his chest. Men pulled the rope. Theodore came back through the water with a face white beneath the rain, and when he reached the bank, he put the boy directly into Evelyn's arms. "Breathe for him," he said. Evelyn worked. She cleared mud from the child's mouth, pressed, breathed, called him back with all the fierce command in her soul. "Come on, Tommy. Come back now. You are not done." The boy coughed water. A sound went up from the men, half prayer, half sob. Evelyn wrapped him in her coat and turned next to Caleb. She set his broken leg, bound the bleeding, then crossed to Pike. Pike stared at her, rain running down his face. His arm was badly cut, blood darkening his sleeve. "You would treat me?" he asked. "I am a doctor." He looked ashamed for perhaps the first honest moment of his life. While Evelyn worked on Pike's arm, Theodore searched the wreck for dry blankets and found instead a leather satchel wedged beneath the driver's board. It had split open, papers soaked in the rain. Among them was a packet tied in blue string, marked with Evelyn Quincy's name. He pulled it free. Inside were letters, recommendations, a copy of the dismissal report from St. Louis, a statement from 2 nurses, proof that Julian Pike had been dismissed for theft and that Evelyn had reported him. Theodore's hand closed around the packet. Pike saw it and went gray. By dusk, the injured were carried to Red Hollow. Theodore rode not home but straight to the town hall, soaked to the skin, mud to his knees, with Evelyn beside him and a rescued boy, wrapped in blankets between them. The hall filled quickly. Storm or no storm, people came. Caleb was laid on a table. Pike sat pale and silent, his bandaged arm in a sling Evelyn had tied. Beatrice arrived with fury hidden under concern, until she saw the packet in Theodore's hand. Judge Whitcomb stood near the stove. Theodore stepped into the center of the room. I was asked yesterday whether I vouch for Dr. Evelyn Quincy, he said. Evelyn, standing near the wall, looked at him in surprise. His voice carried, not loud, not polished, stronger than both. I answered like a coward. A murmur moved through the hall. Theodore did not look away from the judge. I said, "She served my household well as a doctor." That was true. It was not the whole truth. Beatrice rose. "Theodore, this is neither the time nor. It is the time you made," he said. She sat slowly. Theodore held up the packet. Dr. Pike carried documents stolen from Dr. Quincy. They prove he lied. They prove she was dismissed from no honorable post. They prove she reported his theft and paid for it with her name. Pike lowered his head. Theodore continued. "Today she saved Caleb Stowe, who slandered her. She saved Dr. Pike, who ruined her. She saved a child from a wagon I was afraid to enter because floodwater took my wife and daughter years ago." His voice roughened, but he did not stop. "And I say before this town that Evelyn Quincy did not come too late. She came after doing what the rest of us pray a good doctor will do. She stayed where life needed her. If shame belongs anywhere, it belongs to those of us who mistook sacrifice for disgrace." Evelyn's eyes filled. Theodore turned then, and in front of Red Hollow, in front of Beatrice, Pike, Caleb, the judge, and every person who had laughed in the street, he walked to Evelyn. He did not seize her hand. He offered his. The choice was hers. "I cannot undo yesterday," he said. "I cannot undo the hall. I cannot even promise I will never be afraid and foolish again. But if the offer still matters to you, not for court, not for land, not for Beatrice Stowe or any judge, I would ask again. Not because I need a wife to make me look fit, because I have seen the woman you are, and I would be honored to build a life beside you." The hall was silent. Evelyn looked at his hand. She thought of every door closed by whispers, every patient she had held through darkness, every mile she had traveled toward a man who had not known how to receive her. Then she looked at Lottie, who stood beside Nora near the door, eyes wide with hope. Evelyn took Theodore's hand, not as surrender, as answer. "I will not be married to save your ranch," she said softly. His mouth trembled almost into a smile. "Good. I will not be hidden when trouble comes. No, I will keep doctoring, even when it costs us supper, sleep, and peace. I know. And if you freeze me out when grief speaks louder than sense, I will tell you. I expect you will." Only then did Evelyn let her fingers close around his. "Yes," she said. "Ask me again when the sun is out and no one is bleeding." A breath of laughter broke through the hall, not mocking this time, but relieved and human. Theodore bowed his head over her hand, and though he did not kiss it, the tenderness in the gesture warmed her more than any public display could have. The hearing 2 weeks later did not go as Beatrice Stowe planned. Judge Whitcomb came to Holbrook Canyon in person. He found Lottie clean, bright, and stubbornly attached to both Theodore and Evelyn. He found a schoolroom taking shape in the old storage cabin, with benches Theodore had built himself and slates ordered from Denver. He found Marisol's baby sleeping in a cradle by the hearth, while Evelyn checked the mother's pulse. He found ranch hands, wives, shepherds, children, and even Mrs. Bell waiting to speak. They told the judge what Evelyn had done. They told him how Theodore had changed. Nora, who feared no one worth fearing, said plainly, "Mr. Theodore used to walk through this house like a closed door. Now he knocks before entering a room, and that is no small thing in a man raised by sorrow." Lottie told the judge, "Aunt Evelyn says coughs need steam, and little girls need stories. Papa Theo is learning voices." Theodore looked deeply uncomfortable at that. Evelyn hid her smile. When Caleb Stowe's signed statement arrived, admitting that Beatrice had pressed the custody complaint to strengthen his claim on canyon water, Judge Whitcomb removed his spectacles and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I have heard enough," he said. Lottie remained at Holbrook Ranch. The school petition passed, and Dr. Evelyn Quincy was granted county recognition to practice in Red Hollow and Holbrook Canyon, though by then most people had already stopped asking whether she was allowed and started asking when she could come. The wedding took place on a clear Saturday morning in the same little church where Shame had first waited for Evelyn. This time, she was not late. She wore a simple cream dress Nora had altered by lamplight, and Mrs. Bell had pressed with tears in her eyes. Wildflowers from the canyon stood in jars by the windows. Lottie carried a small basket of petals and took her duty with great seriousness. Theodore waited at the front. He looked as nervous as a man facing judgment. When Evelyn reached him, she whispered, "You look pale, Mr. Holbrook." He whispered back, "Doctor, I might be coming down with matrimony." She gave him a warning look, but her eyes shone. The vows were plain. Theodore's hand shook once when he spoke Abigail's name in his heart, and let the past be honored without letting it hold him captive. Evelyn heard the tremor and held tighter. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Theodore did not rush the kiss. He looked at her first, asking without words. She lifted her face. The kiss was gentle, solemn, and full of promises neither of them had known how to make when she first stumbled from the stage. Outside, Red Hollow waited. Some faces still carried embarrassment. Some carried joy. Mrs. Bell cried openly. Silas whooped until Nora elbowed him. Even Judge Whitcomb smiled. Beatrice Stowe did not attend. Julian Pike had left the territory with a bandaged arm and a ruined reputation. Theodore and Evelyn stepped onto the church porch together. For a moment, Evelyn saw herself as the town had seen her before. Dusty, late, shamed, swaying on her feet while whispers circled like buzzards. Then Theodore took her hand in public, not her elbow to steady her, not her wrist to guide her. Her hand. He held it openly, firmly, with no trace of reluctance. The town saw, Evelyn saw, and the ache inside her eased in a place he had thought beyond healing. Weeks became months. The canyon changed slowly, as living things do. The storage cabin became a schoolhouse on weekdays and a clinic when need demanded. A painted sign appeared above the door. Dr. Evelyn Quincy Holbrook. Theodore had carved it himself, though he pretended Silas helped more than he did. Evelyn still rode out at all hours. Theodore still worried. Sometimes fear made his voice too sharp. Sometimes exhaustion made hers too quiet. They learned to return, apologize, and begin again before silence became a wall. At supper, Lottie sat between them and corrected Theodore's reading voices with great authority. Nora baked bread. Marisol brought the baby on Sundays. Ranch hands came with injuries they should have mentioned sooner. Evelyn scolded them, treated them, and fed them if they looked hungry. One winter evening, snow dusted the canyon rim and firelight filled the Holbrook kitchen. Evelyn stood at the stove stirring broth while Theodore came in from the barn with cold on his coat and a softness in his eyes he no longer tried to hide. Lottie slept in the next room, one hand curled around her rag doll. Theodore crossed the kitchen and held out his hands to the stove. "Road's icing. Then no one should travel tonight. You would if someone needed you." She glanced at him. "You would hitch the team." He sighed. "I would complain while hitching it. That is growth." He looked at her then, and the smile that touched his mouth was small, real, and hers. On the shelf by the window sat Evelyn's old doctor's bag, mended where the lining had torn, polished, but still scarred from miles of use. Beside it lay Theodore's hat, Lottie's slate, and a folded court paper declaring the child's home secure. Not one of them was untouched by hardship. That was not what made a home. A home was where hardship could enter and find hands ready. A bowl placed before the hungry, a lamp left burning, a horse saddled in rain, a child held through fever, a name defended when gossip turned cruel, a late arrival seen not as failure, but as proof that someone had stayed where mercy required her. Evelyn set the spoon down. Theodore reached for her hand. This time there was no town watching, no judge, no enemy, no crisis asking them to prove anything. Only warmth and quiet and the life they had chosen after shame had done its worst. She placed her hand in his. Outside, snow softened the canyon stones. Inside, the fire burned steady. Bread cooled on the table, and the exhausted doctor, who had come one day late, rested her head against the canyon cowboy's shoulder. Right on time.